Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded on audio tape for minute-taking purposes and is also being webcast live on Council's website. This recording will be made available on Council's website. Code of meeting practice. The order of the business is as shown in the agenda which has been made available. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is open. Doors to the meeting room are to be left open unless the meeting moves into a closed confidential session according to section 13 of the Code of Meeting Practice. Council's Code of Meeting Practice prohibits electronic recordings of a meeting without the express permission of Council. Mobile phones must be turned to silent during the meeting. Let's make sure we all turn them to silent. Apologies. I have a tentative apology from Councillor Castanis. But
I do have an apology
yep.
from Mr. Adamu, A-D-A-M-O-U.
Yes, apology from Mr. Adamo, and I apology.
And I note the apologies from Claire Zhang and Jackie Atta. Great.
If there's no other apologies, can I please have a motion to accept the apologies and grant leave of absence? Moved by Councillor Catter, seconded by Councillor Badalani. I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, declare that carried. Do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? I mean, if you haven't read it as you're going along, if you tend to find something that you have to declare, let us know and we'll include it. Okay, public participation. There are no speakers registered to speak tonight. Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. Can I call for a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting dated the Tuesday the 5th of November 2019 be adopted? Moved by Councillor Catras, seconded by Councillor Badalani. Is there any discussion, any amendments, any addition, any omission? Nothing? There's not. I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, declare that carried. EDC 001-20, verbal report, building and business identification signage. Let's see.
So we have Mr. Spooner here to address the committee. You'll recall that this has been discussed for the last couple of meetings.
Oh, that's right.
In terms of the nature of the building identification signage, in particular this issue where signage does not include other English translation.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Spooner. Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Chair, councillors and members of the committee. As you said, my name is Andrew Spooner. I'm the manager of Environmental Health and Regulatory Services. And, I'm here to talk to you about business identification and building signs. Please
Councillor.
Sorry, let me just interrupt at this point because there's one classification of the person signs. I'm not sure what they said. If you make the resident who drives past the park
Yeah.
and some lady's got a sign up which is got 2.5 metre
Yeah.
advertising support, whatever.
Oh, I know the one.
Yeah, you know the one.
I do know the one. Yeah.
Where does that fall under? It goes up between apparently 6 a.m.
Look, it's probably under the definition of temporary signs.
It comes under the definition of temporary sign.
Yeah. So,
You know the one.
yeah. Under the code set, there's a definition for temporary signs.
It's a temporary sign,
Yeah.
so that,
Yeah.
that's allowed.
Yeah. If you meet the criteria.
Sorry.
If it's on, it depends on where it's located. But I mean, I'm not an expert on that particular aspect, but I can have a look at it and get back to you. But I would suggest that it's a temporary sign.
If I can respond to
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, temporary sign is probably similar, but it's the same as an A-frame when you go for workshops or any other time.
Yeah.
You put A-frames, that's
Yeah.
temporary signage.
But as a temporary sign, I think we've got a policy where, and I don't want to.
Yes, there are some requirements in the DCPs, which, yeah.
For A-frames?
That's for election signs, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Only one person.
But you've got to be standing next to what you can't live on.
Yeah, but if you have 3 signs.
Yeah, you can have four
Sorry.
signs.
Testing my memory now, I think, I'm not sure of the ratio, but
You need to ask your questions
yeah.
into the mic, sorry. And you need to make sure you're speaking to the mic as well.
Yeah, that's right.
use the mic. You want me to use the mic?
Yes, otherwise it's not being picked up by the recording or the, I know, it's interesting, yes, thank you.
I like to stand up and I don't like
My
to.
job to keep an eye on you.
I can hear him. I can hear him.
You're helping
Yes,
me
but
out.
people watching can't.
Can't hear me.
Televised. Webcast.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure of the ratios, but
That's
if
okay.
it's 1 per 3 or 1 per 2 or 1 per 1, but I can certainly confirm that.
That's right.
Okay, any other questions at the moment?
So with the election signs, you say only one person on the sign?
I need to confirm that.
It needs to be confirmed.
I
You
need
can
to
have as
confirm.
many signs as you want, provided they are being.
No, not what number of signs, how many people on one sign?
What, you can have as many as you want, you can have one.
You mean how many candidates?
No, how
That's the whole family there.
how many signs per person?
Yeah, he's saying how many.
How many signs per person?
Yeah, but.
Like A-frame signs?
Yeah, you can have roughly as many as you want, provided you can keep an eye on it.
Like, I would need to check on that. I'm happy to confirm that.
It is
So
covered
remember-
also by the State Electoral Act,
Yes.
as well as the Commonwealth electoral provisions also cover this, the provision of election signs together with the exempt and complying
That's
set.
correct.
So
Yep.
it might be best to double check that while we've
I
provided
will.
advice.
Prior to the last state and federal election, the General Manager wrote to all candidates and outlined our requirements for election signs. I can't recall, but I will follow that letter up and I can happy to provide you with that information so it's clear. But I suspect we'll be doing exactly the same again for future elections.
It's okay.
Okay.
It is, sorry.
Andrew, sorry. I'm possibly a little bit confused. Did I understand correctly that every store, for example, Hurstville, okay, multitude of small businesses, so all the signage that those stores have had to put some sort of an application into council?
No,
Or they're exempt from that
That-
because of some
Yeah.
boundaries that are created?
Yeah.
But we don't really know whether they've actually fitted into those boundaries. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, so I'll move on to that in a minute, but under the code set, it indicates certain types of sign and certain requirements that if you meet that, you don't need approval. So what we have done in the past, I think it was September or earlier in 2018, we did an audit of signage in the CBD in Cogra and Hurstville, and we had a look at the signage and we measured up the signs to see whether they did or didn't comply. But I'll go through each of those, and I'll talk a bit more about that today. I went for a walk this morning and had a bit of a look around the CBD at Hurstville to see how things are looking. and I'll show you some photographs which hopefully will give you a bit more information into that, if that's okay. All right, so moving on, and just like I said, the code step gives a whole range of structures that can be approved, subject to, so it can be installed or erected without the need to provide developer consent, provided you meet the criteria specified in that code step. So for advertising signs, you've probably seen this lovely diagram before, and hopefully you can read what they are, but it talks about, in general terms, the top sign, if you can't see, is a building identification sign, and that can be up to 2.5 metres squared without development consent. The next list of signs are all classified as business identification signs. So the fascia sign, provided it stays within the scope of the fascia, there is no other restrictions on that. Under awning signs, which are very common in the CBD, there's a 1.5 metre squared area restriction and a 2.5 metre length restriction. Top hamper signs, which are shown above the door, but they can also go across the window, a 2.5 metre square area restriction and a 600 metre depth restriction. Window signs, it's the lesser of 20% of the window or 6 metres squared in area, and a wall sign, which is shown on the side of the building at 5 metres squared. So, like I said, I did take some photos, and I'll talk about some examples of shops and signs in Hurstville, and we'll remembering those criteria, see how they compare to the exempt criteria. So if you can't achieve that criteria and you need to get approval from council and lodge a development application, you will need to comply with council's development control plan or plans. At the moment, they're being harmonised as we speak. Both Cogra and former Hurstville have a broad range of requirements for signs and for different types of signs, but the key control of interest is the following control, which is in relation to the wording of those signs. Now, both councils have almost identical wording, and I've only put one up. The only difference between the two is the word advertising. So it says all advertising and signage must be displayed in English but may include a translation in another language. Any translated message must be accurate and complete and using wording and all numbering that is not larger than the English message. So I will show you some photos now, and you will see that these signs don't meet that, but they are exempt development because of the size restrictions, and there is no requirement in the exempt development or in the code step in relation to language. It's only specific to our development control plans.
So just for clarity, if I can,
Yep.
Mr. Spooner, so only if they required a development consent from council would that requirement apply?
That's correct.
Otherwise, it's the requirements of the SEP, the
Yep.
state policy, which makes no mention of what language it can be in.
That's correct.
That's an
Yep.
And that seems to be part of the issue, yeah.
That's the second point. Because I'm going to go through some photos now, and you'll all agree that they don't meet this wording, but they're exempt. So
They don't need to meet that.
they don't meet. So this is some photos. This the photo on the left was taken when the audit was done previously. Obviously, there's been a change of name on this business. They haven't changed the actual size of the sign. This is the under awning sign I'm looking at. So the original sign wouldn't have complied with the council's requirements. The newer version of that is probably marginally a lot better. But if you look at the size of that under awning sign, it's less than the exempt requirements. It's less than the 1.5 and it's less than the 2.5. So therefore, it's exempt development and the DCP requirements do not apply.
Andrew, what stops them? Is there a height?
2.6 metres from the footpath, yeah.
Oh, you've got to have 2.6
Yeah.
metres.
And it can't project along wider than the awning. It's got to be perpendicular to the shop front. There's a couple of other controls, but those are the two main controls in relation to size of signage. But there's nothing on the wording. There is some difference in the streetscape. You'll notice looks like there's some improved pavement down there, which is good. The old photo's a bit hard to see with the glare, but
Thanks to the previous mayor that started all this.
Can I say, Andrew, that would be a pretty bitter pill for people that, have lived in the Hurstville area for many, many years to swallow.
Yes,
A real bitter pill.
yeah,
I find it pretty
Yeah.
disgusting, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is this committee able to write to the state government?
Well, I think you could make a recommendation. If council approved the recommendation, then the council on behalf could write.
You do that, it goes to the environmental planning, and then from environmental planning it goes to the council, and if it does, then you can do any like.
Yes, if it's adopted by the council, then the council would write as a consequence of the recommendation.
But you can make it, you usually just, everyone's happy, I'll just go through.
And again, for the sake of clarity, this council has done that previously, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've done it so many
Yeah,
times
yeah.
before, it's no issue. You can write whatever you want.
We have written
Can't recall,
specifically
Your
on
Honour.
this. Okay, I thought we had written.
No, not on these, we haven't written none of these.
Hurstville Council did many years ago.
Yeah, but not,
Okay.
Okay, so the next slide is of a similar thing. Again, it's a smaller size sign. The writing is rather large in the non-English language, but again, it's not big enough to be beyond the exempt development requirement, therefore the DCP requirements aren't applicable. This sign, obviously there's been a change between when the audit was done and when I took the photo this morning. Still, the sign's below the exempt requirement, so therefore it doesn't need development consent, therefore that wording is quite okay. The other type of sign that we identified during the audit that was problematic were window signs. And I know, unfortunately, when I went for a walk today, there seems to be more of those signs, and we can do something about those. That's the good news. Now, I'll show you some photos here. This is at 127 Forest Road. Those signs were not there when the audit was done, and they've since been placed there. So the requirement is 20% or 6 metres square, whichever is the lesser. But you can see from this building that every basically window is covered with that. So that's something we can definitely do. We can do something on that to get that rectified. And I did notice quite a few examples of these types of signs. This is a fairly new tenant, I believe. When the last audit was done, they weren't at that location at 250 Forest Road. So looks like their business is signs, but it's Mr. Vitamins, so not afraid to put a few signs out to display his business. But again, the signs are of a nature that would be a good or a service, so not complying with the SEP, therefore there's an issue with that one. The next one, that was around last time, but I think they've intensified somewhat. So again, 100% coverage of, advertising service. We can do something about that. So, based on what I've talked about in broad terms, just looking at those two types of category, the under-awning sign and the window sign, which were the two types of sign identified by the audit in 2018 as being the ones being most problematic or being of most concern. The window signs, we can definitely take some action to contact those owners and seek their compliance with the SEP. But in relation to the under-awning signs, then I suspect that the suggestion by the councillor may be the option to go to move a recommendation that we write to the state government to seek amendments to the code SEP to include language requirements similar to what's in the current Cogra and Hurstville development control plans.
The chair, is it 50-50?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I've got to admit, I noticed a couple of signs only in English, cash only.
No, you can put English, but if you want to put something else,
I just said
you've got to
cash
be
only.
50-50.
It has to be not less than 50% English.
Yeah, there's the
So you have 100%
criteria.
English, you can't have 80% French and 20%.
Yeah, it says equal.
I think should be 70-30, so that's the only way to learn more English, my opinion.
That would be a change to council.
We'd have to change our DCP, but
Yeah, look, there's a lot of pros
That's
and
possible.
Any other questions? Because I
Could I
propose
have
that.
one other?
Certainly.
One of the photos you showed had a wall sign
Yes.
down the side of the premises.
Yep.
In the case that the wall sign
Tell me
was used,
which one.
no, it was right up at the beginning.
Oh, at the beginning.
Yeah.
Sorry. Must have been that one then. Was it that one?
No, I think it was well, you called it a wall sign. It was actually.
Oh,
down-
it was the
actual-
box. It was the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Now, in the case that wall sign would be used for someone else's advertising,
No.
would that be categorised as something that needs?
It's got to be relate to the premise by which the sign is attached.
That's the exempt that you
Yes. Yeah. So if it's, you can't advertise your mate's business from your property because it's not exempt development.
Well,
And I don't think it'd be permissible by the DCP either.
On the corner of King George's Road and Parramatta Avenue at Beverly Hills,
yeah.
there's a boarding house.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I know.
It's got a big sign
Yes,
uh,
I drive past it every day.
saying, I think it's level 33,
That's the construction company, yeah.
constructing for the state government.
Right.
Something
And it's
like that.
not related to that site.
And it's not related.
Okay.
They built it, obviously,
Yes.
but it's a boarding house.
Boarding house?
Yeah,
Level 33 didn't build it. It was Mackey Construction that built it.
Mackey, sorry.
That was the,
Mackey.
it's Mackey
We
Construction.
can chase that up to get.
It's not
that
level
sign.
3, it's got Mackey Construction
Yeah.
building something.
Yeah,
And we can,
That's his,
you're right.
we can chase that up to get that sign.
I know. Yeah. So councillor Badalati, you want to move a motion that we write to the state
I'll
government?
move that this committee or subcommittee writes to the state government.
Yep.
To be able to standardise the, what is it, set under
Yeah. Yep. So environmental planning, I'll just get it up.
appropriate set
Yep.
to ensure 50%, at least 50% of signage is in English.
It should be 73. Right, so we have a mover, I have a seconder for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Catras, any discussions? There's no discussions, I'll put that. All in favour, say aye. Oh, we've got to also adopt the, well, I mean, okay, we've got that motion. We'll do it as part of the overall thing.
Let's
Discuss.
not have a percentage in there, we'll just say the majority.
The majority is 50, over 50, that's what majority is about.
Yeah,
But through the chair, you need to
percentage.
quantify it. 'cause
You can go,
it's
we
open
said
to
minimum.
interpretation.
Sorry?
Open to interpretation, you've got to put a figure in there, saying majority.
Look, trust me, just put 51% and let the state government come back to you if they do come back. Yep, no, that's it. Okay, so is there any other question to Mr. Spooner? There's none. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very informative, and thank you. Let's just put the motion that Councillor Badalati moved, and also that the committee note the verbal report provided by the Manager of Environment, Health and Regulatory Service. Moved by Councillor Badalati, seconded by Councillor Catras. If there's no discussion, I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, declare that carried. Next item is EDC 002-20 lead-in for change event series. Who's going to be?
Ms. Barnes is going to present on that, Mr. Chair.
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you.
So good evening, can you hear me on that? So good evening, councillors and committee members. I'm here on a slightly different topic to talk to you about the Leading for Change event series that council's been hosting and will continue to host through to March. And thank you, because some of you in the room have actually attended these particular events, and we're hoping that you're getting as much out of it as what we are. So just to set the scene a little bit, the City Strategy and Innovation team was working on some key strategies throughout last year. One of them was the Georges River 2050 Leading for Change document. So that document is a really aspirational document for the city. It talks about the key pillars, where we can be, how we can be a leading council over the next 30 years. So as part of that, creating that document, we actually wanted to deliver some things for the community. We wanted to really start positioning the council and be really aspirational and be really clear in our vision for council as well, and for the city more broadly. So we've created the Leading for Change event series, which is a series of events that really work around that advocacy program, that positioning of the city, that building our reputation. So from the 4th to the 6th of February, we had Dr. Hila Oren out from the Tel Aviv Foundation, which is the philanthropic version of the City Council. And she's an expert in her field. She looks after a lot of the branding and reputation for the city. And we hosted her for a full week where she went through particular aspects of our reputation and how we can help really build upon what we have already as a strong council and as a strong city, and how we can help position ourselves into the future as a leader in innovation and also as a leader in Greater Sydney into the future as well. So that was one of our key events, and that was off the back of our Smart Cities program. So a lot of you would have heard about our Smart Cities program, which involves the development of the chill out hubs. They've been highly successful. They've been installed in 3 different locations across the city. So Mortdale Town Centre, we've got one down here at Timothy Reserve in Hurstville, and also in Cogra Town Centre outside the library. There's initial surveying that's been done of those chill out sites, and we just got them through from UNSW, our partner, this morning. So there's been 200 people surveyed so far. 89% of people liked the chill out hubs. 55% that said they improved the public domain, so the area, and 92% that they said they would like them in other places. So we're going to be working towards that high standard in the future. So as part of that, just to talk briefly on that Smart Cities program. So those chill out hubs, they are really unique. They're a world first. It's something that council has above any other city in the world. Those particular chill out hubs are essentially outdoor working spaces for people. They are wired up. They're the start of our Internet of Things. They link into a council asset management system. And overall, they're just a great addition to the public domain. We've actually used them as office spaces, which has been fantastic when there's a lack of office space in the building. So definitely encourage you and the community to get out there and use those particular locations. So back onto the event series. The next event that we held was last Thursday was a collaboration between Georges River Council and the Regional Development Association Sydney, and it was hosted by ANSTO, and that was about the Southern Sydney Innovation and Entrepreneurship Roundtable. So that was really to talk about how the South District could help promote startups, innovation and entrepreneurship throughout the city. Because we identified that there is a gap at the moment in jobs within the South District and jobs containment. And one of those big factors that can help promote that is promoting innovation in our city and helping our startups and entrepreneurs get a little bit of a leg up in that space. So we're starting that conversation with those big players such as ANSTO. We had University of New South Wales, we had University of Wollongong, and we had UTS here as well, really interested in that conversation. So that's something that will continue over the next couple of months. The next event we have is actually on Thursday, and that's to launch the Chill Out Hub. So that's an event that's going to be attended by Minister Coleman. And it's also going to be held at our Cogra site, so that's a great opportunity, and you're more than welcome to come along to that as well. And then the final event is our flagship event, so that's going to be held on the 20th of March, and that's our Leading for Change 2020. So the Leading for Change 2020 event has some reputable key speakers. It has Dr. Sarah Hill from the Greater Sydney Commission, CEO of the Greater Sydney Commission. We've also got, let me just consult my notes. At that event, we've also got Dr. Tim Williams, who is one of the key partners at ARIP, which is a advisory firm. And Sue, who else do we have at that event?
And
God.
Chris Brown, the
Yeah.
chair of Western Sydney Dialogue.
Yeah. So the idea of the event is to really cement our strategic significance in Greater Sydney. It's us being a leader in the South. We're really sticking our hand up, we're sticking our neck out there and showing that we are the leading council within the South. We actually have a voice we will have a voice. And there are some key things that we are starting to advocate for in that space, and they'll be really pushed on the day. Some of those key things we're advocating for is the 30-minute city. So making sure that those future transport connections are realised. One of those key transport connections is from Cogra to Parramatta. So linking up not only your health precincts, but also linking up one of your major cities of the future into Cogra, because at the moment our best connection is just the CBD, and we need to think a little bit more broadly than that. So that'll be a key message that comes out of that particular event. The other element of the event is to talk about the jobs growth. So obviously that links in with how we connect to other job precincts within the city, but then it also talks about the opportunity there is to invest in our city. So bringing people into Hurstville and showing them what we have here, showing them the potential of this city, talking to them about Cogra, talking to them about our strategic centres, showing them our villages and showing what unique vibe it has and how that all creates a city moving forward, and how that is a city that you want to discover, you want to visit, and then you want to invest in, because we are looking for a city that's prosperous, and also a city that's positioned well within Greater Sydney to attract not only internal investment, but external as well.
You mentioned about an event in the Cogra Town Square.
Yep.
I sort of recall it because I put it in my diary. What's that one all about?
So that's to launch the Chill Out Hubs, which is the Smart City project, which was the collaboration between Council, UNSW and Street Furniture Australia. So I think you might remember that we were lucky enough to get grant in round 1, and then we also got given a grant in round 2 of the federal government Smart Cities and Suburbs program. We were the only council to get 2 lots of grants.
We were actually the only entity to get two grants.
Not even council. We were the only entity to get 2 lots of grants in that. So we've done extremely well to get that.
Oh, that's good.
And it is important because it's a Commonwealth funded grant. That's why the federal minister is coming to launch it.
Which minister's coming?
Well, it's David
David
Coleman,
Coleman.
because originally
Is he coming?
yes, he is. Yes.
Oh.
Yep.
It was on leave of absence.
Oh, he's RSVP, but we can check.
We'll double check that, but as far as we're aware, if it's not him, it must be another minister. Certainly originally they were going to have Minister Tudge do the launch, because it's out of his department, Minister Tudge, Innovation.
And then I'll just give his office a call and
We will double
reconfirm.
check. We will.
Just one other question. There's a lot of things that seem to be going on, which is good, and I'm just thinking, how do you get the message across for people to attend to these? Is it just on the web page, or is there another media sort of?
Well, in the case of the launch event, which is the 20th of March event, we're ringing around, speaking to people directly. We've got contacts in other agencies such as the Committee for Sydney, asking them to spread the word. So we've done direct mail outs, direct contacts, telephone calls, all the sort of things.
And is the leader in on this too?
They're part of the process of promoting and promoting events, etc. We've been very focused on the first couple of events, and after Thursday, we'll be focusing the next month to get all the right people in the room for.
Oh, did you say March or February?
Is it February or March?
There's 2 events.
That's what I thought.
There's
so.
one on the
20th of
20th Feb, which is the one in Cogra, launching the Chill Out Hub.
Yep.
And then the next event's also on the 20th and 20th of March. So it's easy for people to remember.
And that's at Club Central.
When you call it a chill out, it's good. Okay, it's a, what do you call it? It's a catching sort of thing. But
That is a chill out.
How do you know what it is? How do people find out what is this chill out?
That's a good question. But we've
I mean,
been,
for someone that's just walking down the street and looks it up at the web page, we're going to have a chill out event. Now, what is it?
I suppose the name was intended just for that purpose. So the idea is that it's a bit of a catchy name. So you kind of go, oh yeah, that sounds cool. But then the other element of the project, which is probably a little bit less sexy, but just as important, is that it measures the microclimate as well. So the idea is that these particular spaces actually cool down. So it is a cool area for you to sit in. But the idea is that you just walk past and you happen across them. And you sit there because it's public domain and it feels safe, it feels connected, and it feels like somewhere where you would like to go about your business or meet your friends or...
What do you mean cool down? Well, I don't understand what you mean cool down.
So they're actually meant to be, they've been created in a way that they're actually cooling down the area. So that's why the shade,
plants and
the
Well,
greening.
I was there, I didn't see any shade or anything. I was just got the perspex glass that gets the sun to protrude onto your head. I was sitting there.
We'll get the measurements from it as well.
Yeah, you can
so-
measure my head. It wasn't cool, I tell you.
We have had a
No,
little bit of feedback about that.
Because
yeah.
we've had, the whole thing, when you put a perspex glass in there, of course it's going to magnify the rays of the sun going
That's
on
the
your head. It's gonna get
solar.
worse.
Yeah, that's the solar.
Unless you've got a mini fans that sit in around the area, there are solar fans that are actually cooling
So
it. I don't know.
part of the survey work we're doing with the community at the moment is about what improvements would they like. We've put some options to them, including misting, small misting devices.
Yeah, but why do we need that for? I don't understand it. Does that save the environment? I don't understand what it's doing. You're trying to keep me cool when I'm sitting there playing with my computer. If the weather's hot, I'll be going. If it's not hot, I'll stay there. I mean, it's just simple.
Yeah.
And
So why would you be putting things in there it's meant to be a natural environment. It's not going to the park and say, it's a bit cool, better put some misty fans and we better put these things in there to cool you down. I mean, if it's hot, you sit in the shade, it's not hot, come back. I don't know. I don't understand.
Well, we actually try and encourage people to use the space for extended periods of time. But yes, we're testing some of those ideas about what additional elements could be added to the chill out hubs that might actually make it even more comfortable for people, not just to stay there, but actually to stay there longer.
Your problem becomes, sorry to say that, and I've used it, I sat there, I watch people, what they do, and they're all like, all right, so nothing wrong with that, I have nothing against them, but that's what they're doing, which discourages kids and other people being there. So that's one big thing, because you can't sit in a cafe shop, so you end up sitting in a motel, smoking and doing what you want, and you can't tell them anything, because there's no big signs to say anything or to police it.
So that's the motel one. It's the one that we've made completely off grid, so it actually has its own power generation because it's not connected to the grid. The other two, the one in
Timothy Reserve.
Cogger and
Yep.
Timothy.
Timothy.
I'm going to get Thomas and Timothy back to front.
They're cousins anyway.
And they are connected to the grid, so they don't have the solar panels. So far the use has been pretty good, but yes, all public spaces are used by different people for different purposes.
Yeah.
We've actually had at the entrepreneur roundtable last Thursday. It was also on Thursday. We actually presented. We were presenting some ideas. We had the CEO of the Northern Sydney Innovation Alliance, and he said, you know what councils should do? They should build spaces, collaborative spaces in the public domain where you can connect, have Wi-Fi, charge your phone, charge your computer, etc. That's what the chill out hubs are.
That's what we have at Hurstville here. We've had that for 20 years. We've had the Wi-Fi for 20 years. I haven't seen people sitting down and using it. So.
Unless they can also charge.
Charging is a minor thing. But
Can I, through the chair, I'd like to make a comment. I actually think whatever you can do in the corporate town square to encourage them to sort of be there and stay there is a good thing. The problem I find with the corporate town square, there is one area where it has the sort of arcade. I wouldn't call it arcade. What's it called? Colonnade.
Yes.
It was meant to be a colonnade, not to be rented out for seating for a restaurant.
Yes.
Unfortunately, certain elements took over and they made it a restaurant, seating for a restaurant. It was supposed to be somewhere where people can actually sit, not what it ended up doing. And when we were doing that building, there was supposed to be a colonnade on the other side, a proper colonnade, not this sort of walk-through little channel. So I see the issue more with the Cogra Town Square. It's just a walk-through area. People just walk through to the library, and it's not really amicable to sitting around. But then we've got to balance that out with, you know, having events there. You can't sort of clutter the place with all sorts of seats and stuff like that, and then find the events can't function. So yeah, I agree. But see, Cogra's got a real issue with nightlife. It doesn't exist. Maybe later on when the units go up and stuff like this, people are going to want to find spaces because there's not much green space or passive recreational space in that Cogra area. But once those units go up, I don't know, maybe it'll be a different story, but it really is lacking nightlife.
So the other,
Sorry, through the chair. I was actually, about 3 and a bit years ago, I was actually part of the assessment team for this project at UNSW. I was asked to be involved with it, and I spent quite a few months with the uni students because they were given the task of coming up with something for the future. And this sort of fits the profile, but what I'm a bit confused about is that at the time, there was all sorts of studies done, admittedly within the confines of the students at UNSW, but it was directed mainly for the purpose of putting these sorts of things in parklands, not in streetscapes.
Is that the barbecue project?
It was the barbecue project, and I was part of the assessment team at the end. And I think it's a great idea. I struggled, like the councillors, to see that in those particular positions. I know the one, particularly at Cogra, I just can't see it working there. I think the idea is great, but I just don't think the locations are right. The whole intention at the beginning, as you said, was the barbecue setup, but it was a barbecue set up to invite people that want to have a barbecue and that have got teenage kids that don't really want to be involved, and let's get the kids there because we've got the internet and all that sort of stuff. Everything's there for you so you can become part of the family and join in. There, I just can't see it. I can't see someone from Tate College going there and playing with his computer or using that when he's got a perfectly good cafeteria to do the same thing in air-conditioned comfort.
Interesting you should say that, because one of the local startup or leaders in the local startup industry here, who actually does venture capital raising for startup companies, he has used the Cogra Chill Out Hub to work and meet with people as well. So I think we need to, because part of it is that some of these spaces will evolve over time. They're part of the, and I've got them up here, I was going to show the councillors, but it comes with a dashboard. It comes with a dashboard. We can measure activity and use of the space. So we actually know how people are using the space. So we evolve when we design things. So we don't just guess some of these things. We know how it's being used. We know when it's being used. We get information about if the bin's full. We do all that sort of stuff. We know about what's happening in the space. The other thing it enables us to do is that it actually can measure activity in places like this. The initial furniture, the first ramp furniture was put into Olds Park. Out of that, we actually monitor activity in Olds Park. What are people actually using the space? Not actually what they're doing at the furniture. Because there's sensors and other monitors, we actually can measure how people are using the whole part of Olds Park as well. So we actually can measure, are they, not surprisingly, in Olds Park, there's a really large proportion of people who love to go walking on that walking track. And we know how many people use that walking track and what time of the day they use it. So which is actually great data as we develop the master plan for master.
How do you pick that up?
There's sensors that pick up by vibration, so we know what activity, know when people are in the area. They can tell by the vibrations. There's also sensors that pick up the ping of mobile phones in the area. So we can measure it in both ways.
Sorry, through the chair though.
Sorry.
At the start of your presentation, there's 200 people who've used those hubs. 89% of those like it. So I think we've got to keep in mind. So the question would be, is out of those 200 people, if the hub at Cogra is your issue, how many of those people were from the Cogra hub? If it's over 50%, then we're on a good thing. It's just tweaking. I think it's a generational thing too. And so we also have to be mindful of that. I mean, we grew up with backyards, etc. The younger generation coming through just like to hang. And if you're talking about doing your work in a cafe, as if I owned a cafe, I don't want a student there on a $3 cup of coffee taking up a table for 4 hours.
They buy coffee and go outside and work.
Yeah.
I wasn't insinuating that.
No, but
I do that all the time. $4 coffee, I sit there for 4 hours.
What I was actually
What?
referring to
That's
is
what you
that
meet
the
people.
TAFE has its own cafeteria, so if a student wants to play with his computer, he can go and sit in the cafeteria at the TAFE college.
yeah, he can.
And
Or she
my
can.
only
Yeah, I agree.
quiz with this is that, how many have been put in? How many?
3.
3. Have any been put in parklands?
Yes.
Yeah, there was one in Timothy Reserve.
Okay, well, if that's the case, okay, you're going to get a cross section of whether it works in a parkland situation or in a Cogra situation.
Yeah.
I think
If
those
that's-
The feedback at the
all.
moment is that they are obviously, if people like them, they're going to use them. If they don't like them, they're not going to use them. But at the moment, the people who have used it, there is really good feedback. So I think we've got to see that as a positive thing. And as Sue said, these aren't a cookie cutter, one size fits all solution. They're new, they're exciting, they're street furniture, they don't fit everywhere. But where they are at the moment, I think we should be really proud of them, because it is something that, as a council, it's not just the piece of infrastructure that's in the ground, it's the collaboration between a university and a private and an industry body that's created these things, and they're a world first, and that's something that we want to be a leader, and this is something that we are leading. So I think we should be proud of them.
You need to be proud of the fact that of the 200 people that you've sampled, there's an 89% approval rate, and that's phenomenally high. So that's what I think as a group we need to remember. Would I use it at this stage? Probably not, but that doesn't mean it's not right. Would my son use it as he gets older? Probably would. So that's what we all need to remember. And I just think, well, congratulations. I'm not sold on it, but I also understand that the results are high, so we've got to, I think, further investigate.
So,
What's the usage
Yeah, I was
in
gonna
the
say.
park?
I don't have that data at the moment. We can try and look into of what percent the 200 was at the
For
park.
me, if somebody goes to a park, it's especially the kids.
Yeah.
Play on the swings, to run around, etc., etc. I would find it a little bit strange that they would take a computer to the park so they can sit there and work on their computer.
Yeah, but different people use it for different things. But yeah, definitely hear your point. The equipment's there for the kids. This is here for a different demographic. But yeah.
And one of the ways it is used in the park, and certainly in Olds Park, because I've seen it, is the parents are sitting there next to the playground watching their kids on the playground, and they have their mobile phone with them, and they are charging their mobile phone while they're watching the kids on the playground. Because we forget that kids don't often go to the playground by themselves; they normally go with their parents. So providing an opportunity, because I think of these spaces the way, it's not my background, but in high density living where people don't have backyards and their living rooms are not huge. In our public spaces, we actually need to build public spaces that are extension of people's living rooms and are their backyards. And when you think about our living room and our backyard, those are things we expect to be connected, safe and comfortable. So we need to provide and design perhaps different public spaces going forward, because these are not things you're just going to do in your living room. And if you are a teenager and you want your own space because you want to hang out, where do you go?
Yep.
My question is, how do you keep them warm?
Can I
You
just
cool
say-
them down with spray, but how are you going to keep them warm in winter?
Can I ask a question here about safety? Ask a question about safety. If you're in your house, if you're in the library, if you're anywhere in the cafe, there's people watching you, they're watching kids. Would I allow my kids to go and sit in there next to somebody else? I don't even know what they are sitting out there at night. I don't know. That's the issue. If you want kids in there, where is the safety of the kids? I don't see any safety out there in the street at night where there's nobody there. and they're going to sit there and play with the computer, someone who's also watching them. We don't know who's sitting next to them. We don't know who they are. That is the issue. It's great to have those. That's why our kids do things in the library. That's why our kids do it at home. That's why the kids sit in there when the parents are watching them. Now, yes, if you take your kid with you and you sit there watching them do something, you can't do anything. I'm sitting in motel, yeah, it's great, good day. You play with your computer because you can use free Wi-Fi for an hour. I mean, what's Wi-Fi is nothing nowadays. I don't know, I still can't.
Yeah, and I suspect that people won't use it, kids
No.
will not use it at night for those reasons.
Well, even during the day, would you know who you're sitting next to?
Like, we can't have those, I mean, I understand that's the point, but kids go out, I wouldn't let my child out, but kids go out and hang out in parks, they've been doing it for years. At the end of the day, the community is made up of the sum of people, and there are people that are willing to use it. I wouldn't let my child go and hang out at the cafe either.
The biggest question is I want to ask is, how many people have you seen them use Mortal? How many from our data tells us how many people have used it so far?
I'd have to find out.
I mean, that's an important information. If there's only 200 people using it, and I'm costing me X amount, and then I know we're getting a grant, then I've got to maintain it, then I've got to keep things happening because it's got to be maintained. You can't just leave it as is. For that 200 people, is it really worth it out of 158,000 people? I don't know.
Maybe we need USB outlets on a train. So every seat's got one, because you sit in a train these days and everyone only communicates by telephone. There's not one word said, which is pretty amazing.
Well, you're not allowed to talk, it says on the train, so you have to use your phone.
I suddenly remember travelling to university many years ago, and everyone had their head in the newspaper, not talking to each other.
Same thing. You can't speak on the train, that's the problem. They won't let you talk on the train, so you really don't.
It's just a different form of information people are observing. They can just do it a whole lot easier.
I think we should encourage the kids to do sports in the park instead of sit on the phone with their mum and dad. And that's why we see a lot of obese kids. They're just at home on the phone or the laptop or iPad. I think that's the best way.
Well, yeah, I think that's right.
We don't see too many tennis courts these days. We used to have tennis courts everywhere.
Well, we certainly know from the data mapping around Olds Park the demand for some of those recreation activities.
More basketball courts, please.
And that's the advantage of the Internet of Things, enabling you to work out where the demand is.
Yeah.
So how much did that hub cost us, each one? Was it 200 or one?
Cost us, the hubs didn't cost us any direct cost because they were funded by the grant built by Street Furniture Australia.
Yeah, but I think it's in the paper, it says 300.
The grant was 380,000.
Sorry?
The grant was 380,000. Yeah.
For the three of them?
Yeah, that was for the full grant. That was the contribution. And then that doesn't include the in-kind support from the particular partners and our project management of it as well.
Does it cost council money or not?
Project management, a few other things.
Project management, yeah.
Which will get you close to $500,000 if we're going to put something like this in the future, if you want to do it yourself. I mean, if we're getting it for nothing, we're getting it, but we've got to maintain it, we're going to do a lot of things to it.
That's
so
correct,
it does cost money.
Yeah.
The numbers will tell the story, won't they?
That's all I'm saying is, and the difficult part would be, are they the same people that are actually going there? Is it like you're getting 100 every week, and is it the same 100? That's where you can't tell, usually.
I don't know about you guys, but I've got 6 grandkids. And when we go out to dinner, the whole lot of them play with their gadgets. Okay, so, and I totally agree that it'd be great getting the kids playing sports and all that, but I think you've got to look at the reality of it. And the reality is, if we told our grandkids, go and play on the swings or sit there and play with your whatever it is these days, they're not going to go and play on the swings, I'll tell you that.
Of course, they can't play on the swing in the restaurant, can they? And kick a ball in a restaurant.
I'm not sure that the chill-out hubs are necessarily designed so the kids are on the playgrounds.
No, I understand that. But it's just we were making a comment about a park, having, encouraging the kids to play rather than on their devices.
But I see customers through the chair, they come to my shop, maybe in the pram, because the eyes have I mean, what's gonna happen to their eyes and their neck down the track?
That's a correct.
Okay, is there,
Yeah, to shut them up.
do we have any more discussion on that? Any more
The
questions?
only advice I was going to give that we've had quite a lot of interest from other councils and other agencies regarding the chill out hubs, so I suspect we'll get quite a lot of interest, and I will not be, at the launches, I've been invited to speak at a conference about the chill out hubs, because there is a lot of interest about the technology that creates them and the process of creation.
I must admit, just the last comment I'd like to make, and I think I totally agree, and I, congratulate you on trying to find a way in making those spaces more interesting for people to stay. And I've got to say, you've just got to look, you need those statistics, you need that sort of information. And we just don't want spaces to be walk-through areas. I will say that, as an example, one of the things that Bayside Council did, and that's up at Brighton Lee Sands, they enlarged the walkway, huge. Yeah. They put seats there, they made it interesting for people to walk. It's no longer just a 1.5 metre walkway. It's now 3.5 leading through it, and it's magnificent. You to a point where my wife and I prefer to go there because it's really magnificent.
It is.
Place is designed for people.
You make the place, whatever it is that this modern day community does, feed them that, they can stay there, that's fine. Even if we have to put one of those sort of things that provide shade in the heart of the summer. We need to tell the community that we care enough about them to make their, journey through our centres and through our areas a little bit more interesting, a little bit more enjoyable. Because once those flats go up, it's going to be, we don't have anything for them. We just don't have anything.
I think the one in Mortail, I've been through it, had a look at it and so on. It is impressive as you walk past. Every time you walk past, you see a beautiful space in there. That's nice. You see a few people sitting there. So it is nice because Mortail, and actually the shopping centres, which you can go to a cafe, but there's a lot of units there. So people from those units would like to come down, have a bit of break from the kids, even as adults. Break from the kids or from somebody, come down, let me do a bit of work in peace, because whoever's going to sit next to me, they're going to be talking and chattering, because everyone's out there to do, if you think so, it gives them that easier. They haven't got the backyard to be able to sit in the backyard and run away. So around medium density, it works because it gives a chance to those people to get out of there. That's why you have open space around units. What's the open space for? It's for the people to come out of their units and sit there, relax, walk a bit, do something. They can't do it in their units. So that's where I found it. It is nicely laid out. It's beautiful. But
That's good feedback, thank you.
no, it's quite nice. It's good.
And I probably should have mentioned as well that in the actual creation of the 3 spaces, there was some people-centred design done. So Street Furniture Australia, before they actually designed the particular hubs, they went out to Mortdale. So they stood outside that particular spot outside Westpac, and they actually spoke to the community, and they said, well, what do you like to do in Mortdale? What do you do here? And a lot of Mortdale in particular, they were talking to a lot of young mums. We want somewhere to meet, we want somewhere to talk, we don't necessarily want to be sitting inside cafes all day, we want somewhere to connect to our community. So that was one of the key bits of feedback for Mortdale. And I think if you know Mortdale, that is what that suburb is all about. It is young families living in smaller units, looking for a place to enjoy in the public domain, and that's how Mortdale has developed. And I think that's what the Chill Out Hub delivers. So that was good for that observation.
It's quite interesting that I mentioned about the smoking, if people smoke it, and the reason being is across the road where you had the cafe shop, they used to have smoking outside.
Yeah,
so
okay.
People used to go in there and smoking outside and having coffee. Something that's been taken away. They go, where do I go and smoke now?
Finding somewhere
So they
else.
grab their cup of coffee and they come and sit there. The smoke. So I've suggested that we should be putting a sign,
Signage.
no smoking, completely, because you don't want to have kids sitting in there while someone smoking. So a sign has to be there and it has to be say it's enforceable if you smoke here. So people don't use that. And what I felt at the time, that was around Christmas, they were using that as a place to get a coffee and sit there and smoke because and somebody said they can't smoke. I said, where does it say there's no smoking? It's open air. You haven't said there's no smoking here. I go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that we need to have signs in here that sort of,
Yeah.
I mean, in the park, you don't have to because people can't smoke in the park. but in there, you could smoke
In the streetscape,
in the
yeah.
street, so we
Yep.
need to have that. So it's something that we should be putting there.
Yep, no
About no
worries.
smoking, and I think
Who's
it'll
going to
make.
do the ongoing maintenance there?
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Thanks, excuse. Well, we need to finish anyway. That's it. You can go, but you need to finish, thank you.
Just like any other piece of street furniture, it's maintained by council.
Let's finish with. Okay, is there any more comments or discussion? Thank you for that. That's quite informative, and it'll be interesting to see if we can get some feedback on the number of people that have been using it. And as Councillor Badalati said, it'd be nice to know how many in the park would use it, how many in the main CBD, which is like Cogra, and how many in a village atmosphere, if you want to call it like Mortal, have been using it, and which would be better suited for what we want to do. And that's where we can decide down the track where it's best suited to put in. So 3 great locations with different people living in different densities and so on. So it'll be quite good to know what is the best way to go from there.
Right.
All right. If there's no further discussion, can we have a motion to be moved that the Economic Development Advisory Committee receive and note the following report, moved by Councillor Badalati, seconded by Mrs. Drake. Is there any discussion? If there's none, I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, declare that carried. There being no more items on the agenda. Oh, sorry, yes, we need to.
Just have one,
Yes.
2 verbal matters,
Yes,
if I
we
can.
talk.
The first is to just let the committee know that Craig Evanson, was a long-standing member of
That's right, yeah.
the council and attended many of these meetings, I would suspect. He left the organisation in November, I think, or December, was December, yeah. Pursuing other opportunities. And we'll update you on terms of what's happening next, but that leaves an opportunity for some a realignment in terms of roles within the directorate. And then the other piece of information is that the term of this committee has come to an end, so there will be a report to council about the next steps forward on that matter. And we'll keep you informed of that progress. And thank you all for your service to the committee. There's not many of you here at the moment, but we would thank you.
Yep. No, thank you so much for that. And everyone's been offering their time and their expertise to come out here and share it with us. So thank you. All right. If there's no more items, we will declare the meeting closed at 7:13. Took an hour and 2 minutes. Thank you.